Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 276, and this fight card is just crazy stacked from top to bottom. The prelims are so good. Not only will they be airing on ESPN, they will also be airing on ABC. That just goes to show you how good this card is. And opening up the main card, we have an amazing bantamweight fight. Pedro Munhoz versus Sean O'Malley, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this fight. And I've already done a bunch of prediction videos for UFC 276. The ones I already have done, I will link down in the description if you want to go check them out after this. But I have more coming, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And also, guys, if you want to support the channel, we have a members-only Discord. You can join. The link is down in the description. We will be chatting live during UFC 276. I cannot wait for this card. And if you look at this fight between Munhoz and O'Malley, this is a very important fight because even though you have two title fights on the card, I believe there's people who are most looking forward to seeing Munhoz versus O'Malley. That's how compelling this matchup is. Sean O'Malley comes into this fight with so much hype behind him. And you have Pedro Munhoz, who's on a bit of a losing streak right now. He needs a win. And, he's fighting for relevancy within the bantamweight division. And if he gets a win over a big name like Sean O'Malley, I know he's behind him in the rankings, but if he can go out there and beat Sean O'Malley, Pedro Munhoz will be relevant in the bantamweight division again. And for O'Malley, a lot of people are just super excited to see him tested against elite competition. O'Malley has looked great in his UFC career against lesser competition, but now he gets a real legitimate test in Pedro Munhoz, and I'm very curious to see how he does in this fight. Looking at the tail of the tape, you have Pedro Munhoz, who's ranked number 10 in the UFC official rankings. Sean O'Malley is ranked number 13. Munhoz is 35 years old. O'Malley is 27. Munhoz is 5'6". O'Malley is 5'11". Munhoz has a 65-inch reach. O'Malley has a 72-inch reach. So a massive 7-inch reach advantage for Sean O'Malley, and he has quite a bit of height advantage as well. You look at Sean O'Malley in his pro MMA career, he is 15-1. He comes into this fight on a 3-fight win streak. His last fight was at UFC 269 against Raulian Paiva. He defeated him via TKO in the first round. Looked phenomenal doing it. He beat up Raulian Paiva from start to finish. Just looked great, just outstruck him, and eventually finished him towards the tail end of the round. Hurt him badly, then swarmed him on the feet. But one thing I wanted to mention about this fight, don't get me wrong, Raulian Paiva is a decent fighter, but a lot of people were elevating his skill level so that when Sean O'Malley beat him, they could pretend like this was some massive win for Sean O'Malley. Raulian Paiva, I know the bantamweight division is stacked, but Raulian Paiva is not even ranked. I know at one point he was ranked number 15, but he's never really beaten really good competition himself. And, I think this was the best opponent that O'Malley's ever faced, but that's not really saying much. The fight before that, Sean O'Malley defeated Chris Montinho, just beat him up. The accuracy in this fight was incredible. Just beat him up for 3 rounds, eventually finished him due to accumulation at the end of the 3rd round. I don't know why Herb decided to step in at the point he did. Chris Montinho was still rushing forward. But that doesn't change the fact that O'Malley, just used Chris Montinho as a punching bag. But don't get me wrong, Chris Montinho really didn't belong in the UFC at this point in time. He's a flyweight anyway, and also he came in on short notice. There were so many factors in this fight, and Sean O'Malley should have won this fight, and he should have looked as incredible as he did. One thing I did notice is the stamina looked like a little bit of an issue, but I think it was the volume. The pace of the fight was there was such a high output from Sean O'Malley. I don't blame him for getting a little bit tired, and it's not like he gassed or it ended up being detrimental to him. I mean, the fight got stopped with 30 seconds to go. He would have been fine. The fight before that, Thomas Almeida almost finished him in the first round. Sean O'Malley's constantly looking for those walk-off flashy KOs. Doesn't follow up. The ref doesn't stop it. Eventually, the fight continues. Sean O'Malley just outstrikes him and eventually drops him in the 3rd round. Almost doesn't follow up again. The ref doesn't step in, and then he throws the most nasty right hand ground and pound I've ever seen in my life and basically killed Almeida. I mean, this was a brutal ground and pound KO. The fight before that, back at UFC 252, August of 2020, his only loss in the UFC, and against the best competition that he's ever fought, Marlon Vera. And in this fight, I know a lot of people like to push the narrative that Sean O'Malley was winning this fight up until Vera hit the nerve and blah, blah, blah. This was a 50-50 fight. Marlon Vera chopped the legs, hurt Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley was having issues with his foot. He was having drop foot because Vera hit the nerve. eventually gets shucked to the ground, and then brutally flash KO'd with ground and pound elbows, and then stretchered out of the cage with no serious injury. And, I'm not going to talk about some of these other opponents. That's just getting way too far down the list. But he hasn't fought the best competition. Eddie Wineland, Jose Alberto Quinones, Andre Sukumata. It's just not the greatest opponents, not the greatest level of competition. The best win he has is Raulian Paiva, no doubt about that. But the best fighter he's ever fought is Marlon Vera, but that doesn't matter because he's lost that fight. But Sean O'Malley has consistently improved, and I'm really excited to see him fight Pedro Munhoz. You look at Pedro Munhoz, he's coming in kind of on a skid. He's lost 4 out of his last 5. His last fight, he fought Dominic Cruz on that same card at UFC 269. Almost finished Dominic Cruz in the first round. Dominic Cruz somehow recovered. He was flash KO'd. I think he was hurt by a jab and then flash KO'd as Pedro Munhoz swarmed him. But Dominic Cruz survived. He ended up looking good for the rest of the first round. And then in the second and third round, he just outstruck Pedro Munhoz. Pedro Munhoz could not find him with the footwork of Dominic Cruz, with the awkward striking of Dominic Cruz. He was not able to track him down, got outstruck, and lost the unanimous decision. Before that, he lost to Jose Aldo at UFC 265, August of last year. And in this fight, Jose Aldo just looked so dialed in. I mean, he was checking all the kicks to Pedro Munhoz. He was landing nasty jabs, left hands, and he just outstruck Pedro Munhoz. I mean, the level of competition that Pedro Munhoz has fought, it's just incredible. And I think Pedro Munhoz for a long time has been dramatically underrated at 135 pounds. The fight before that, he beat Jimmy Rivera by decision. This was all the way back in February of 2021. And before that, I want to mention he lost to Frankie Edgar via split decision, but he won this fight. He did more damage. He landed more strikes in this fight. I think he should have got the win, and it was a borderline robbery against Frankie Edgar. And before that, he lost to current bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling. So even though he's lost 4 out of his last 5, it's not like he's getting finished. He's losing decisions. The Dominic Cruz fight, he almost won. The Frankie Edgar fight, he should have won. So it's not like he's just going out there and getting outclassed. And Jimmy Rivera, even though he's not in the UFC anymore, that's still a solid win for him at the time. And another thing I wanted to mention about Sean O'Malley, out of all his opponents, the only guy still in the UFC that he's beat, I believe, is Raulian Paiva. I know Eddie Wineland just fought recently, but I think they only brought him back because they needed a short notice replacement, and he got destroyed in that fight, and then he retired himself. So out of all the wins he has, only one fighter that he beat, Raulian Paiva, who just lost on UFC Vegas 57, is still in the UFC. Other than that, Marlon Vera, obviously, we already know he lost to him. So when I break down this fight, this is actually a weird fight because I feel like both guys are bad matchups for each other. So when you look at Pedro Munhoz and how he matches up against Sean O'Malley, what's bad for Pedro Munhoz? It's long, lengthy guys who have good striking and have good footwork. And for Sean O'Malley, what's, a bad matchup for him? It's a guy that's going to plot forward, pressure him, and who is super durable and has a very good gas tank and has great leg kicks, and that's Pedro Munhoz. So this is really kind of a tough matchup for both guys, and when I look to path to victory, I really think both these guys have a lot of options. I do not think that Sean O'Malley is going to initiate the grappling in this fight. I don't think Pedro Munhoz is going to initiate the grappling in this fight either. If I had to give like a jiu-jitsu advantage, I'd probably give it to Pedro Munhoz. He has a really good guillotine that he's pulled out throughout the course of his MMA career. Sean O'Malley has only won 1 fight by submission. Sean O'Malley primarily finishing guys on the feet, TKO or KOing him. Out of 15 wins, he has 11 KOs, which is absolutely incredible. And if you look at Pedro Munhoz's pro MMA career, he has 19 wins, 5 by TKO or KO, 8 by submission, and 6 by decision. So there's not a particular way that Pedro Munhoz likes to win fights, but this is a fight that I feel like a lot of people either think Pedro Munhoz is going to go out there and expose Sean O'Malley, or they think O'Malley's going to go out there and really put on a striking clinic and finish Pedro Munhoz, and they're very confident in Sean O'Malley. And there's 2 different ends of the spectrum, playing into this fight as well. You have the Sean O'Malley haters, and then you have the Sean O'Malley cult-like following. And a lot of people like to classify me as a Sean O'Malley hater, but I'm just a guy that, I call out what I see, and I haven't seen him fight elite competition. He's looked incredible against lesser competition, but at the same time, this is his biggest test in his career. One thing that I think a lot of people will be doing after this fight, let's say Sean O'Malley goes out there and beats Pedro Munhoz. I think a lot of Sean O'Malley haters will be trying to discredit the win. They'll say Pedro Munhoz is 35 years old. He's over the hill. You know, he's only won one fight in his last 5 fights. And at that point, he would have won one fight in his last 6 if he loses to Sean O'Malley. And they'll be discrediting the win. I will not be one of those people. If Sean O'Malley goes out there and beats Pedro Munhoz and beats him impressively, I think it will be a solid win, and I think it will prove that Sean O'Malley belongs in the top 10 of the bantamweight division, which I think is the most stacked division in all the UFC. And also, if Marlon Vera wins his next fight against Dominic Cruz and Sean O'Malley wins this fight, I think that Marlon Vera may have very well earned his rematch against Sean O'Malley. And I would love to see Marlon Vera, Sean O'Malley 2 in a fight night main event. I would love to see these guys go 5 rounds. Sean O'Malley's never gone 5 rounds. And if whoever wins that fight, I know the division's kind of logjam right now, but we could see the winner of that fight in title contention in the bantamweight division. We know the UFC is trying to push Sean O'Malley towards the top of the division. He's a star in the making. A lot of people care about Sean O'Malley as it is right now. But when I see this fight, I really see this fight, it could go a million different ways. There's so many paths to victory for each guy. I think, Pedro Munhoz can win any way he wants. I think Sean O'Malley probably has to win by KO or decision. I doubt Sean O'Malley's going to be looking to submit him, but who knows? And when I see this fight playing out, I really see Pedro Munhoz pushing forward, looking to get inside, land some shots, and just chop the legs of Sean O'Malley. And over the history of Sean O'Malley's career, we've seen issues with his leg durability. He had issues in the Andrei Sukumatov fight. He had issues in the Marlon Vera fight. We've seen him get perpetually injured when getting his legs chopped. And, that worries me a bit in this fight against Pedro Munhoz, because Pedro Munhoz has some of the nastiest leg kicks in the division. And he also has an iron chin. So I really see Pedro Munhoz kind of taking that Chris Montino route. I think he's really going to press forward, look to land shots on Sean O'Malley and chop the legs. But Sean O'Malley is such a dynamic striker, and he has a 7-inch reach advantage and, a 5-inch height advantage on Pedro Munhoz. Pedro Munhoz is a guy that we've talked about potentially moving down to flyweight. I think it's going to be really tough for him to get inside and land strikes on Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley has great head movement. Sean O'Malley has great feints. Sean O'Malley has great teep kicks to the body to keep the distance against Pedro Munhoz. I think he'll be teep into the body. He has great oblique kicks as well. And it's going to be very tough for Pedro Munhoz with all those disadvantages to get inside. But if he is, and he's able to continue to chop those legs, because Sean O'Malley is very heavy on that lead leg, I think there is a chance that Pedro Munhoz wins this fight via TKO due to some type of leg injury against Sean O'Malley. I don't know what's going on with him, but it just seems like a persistent issue for Sean O'Malley. But how do I see the fight going down? I am going to go Sean O'Malley by decision. And the reason I'm going Sean O'Malley by decision, I just think he's a superior striker to Pedro Munhoz. I don't think Pedro Munhoz is going to initiate the grappling whatsoever. And I just really, even if he did, I really don't think he's going to be able to track Sean O'Malley down and take him down. O'Malley's got good footwork, good feints, good striking, good variety of attacks. And I think he's just going to be using those teep kicks to the body, using those oblique kicks, pumping the jab, using that 7-inch reach advantage to keep Pedro Munhoz off of him. And if Pedro Munhoz can't catch up to him and land shots, how's he going to win the fight? But Pedro Munhoz is so durable. He's never lost a fight by KO or TKO. So I really have a hard time believing that Sean O'Malley is going to stop him. I think this is going to be a fight where Sean O'Malley looks really good on the feet. I think he's going to beat up Pedro Munhoz. I think Pedro Munhoz is going to have some moments where he really chops those legs, but I think that's going to be the best moments of the fight for Pedro Munhoz. But I'm very curious to see how this fight goes, because this is the best fighter that Sean O'Malley's ever faced. And if he can go out there and put on a performance against Pedro Munhoz like he has on Chris Montino or like he did against Raulian Paiva, that will be a massive win, and we will have a star within the bantamweight division. And I really do think he gets it done, just because the footwork, it's going to be so hard, the height advantage, the reach advantage. There's so many issues. Sean O'Malley is much faster than Pedro Munhoz as well. I just think there's no way outside of the leg kicks, which Munhoz throws a lot of those leg kicks. He will continue to spam those leg kicks throughout the fight. But outside of doing something, some type of leg damage, I just don't see him finding the chin of Sean O'Malley. I don't see him initiating the grappling. And with the output that O'Malley put out in that Chris Monteño fight, I have a hard time believing that he's going to gas out in a fight that's going to end up being detrimental to him and causing him to lose fights. I think both guys have good stamina. I think Pedro Munhoz has good striking, but it's just a matter of the reach disadvantage. When a guy's just pumping a jab over and over and over again, teeping you to the body, Sean O'Malley loves the teep kicks to the body. But I just don't think that Sean O'Malley's going to be able to get it done as far as finishing him, because Pedro Munhoz just has a granite chin. But I see O'Malley throwing a lot of straight punches. He's going to be pumping the jab. He's going to be landing the straight right hand. He's going to be switching stances. He's going to be teeping to the body, chopping the legs. And I think Munhoz is going to be kind of just plodding forward, following Sean O'Malley, trying to cut him off and chopping the legs, but he's just not going to be successful. Sean O'Malley's going to probably win every round, just outstriking him, but I think it will be a very competitive and fun fight because Pedro Munhoz is not going away in this fight. So I think he will continue to try to win. There's some guys, when they're getting beat up in the fight, they kind of pack it in and they just survive and they don't really try to win. Pedro Munhoz will try to win this fight from start to finish against Sean O'Malley, but I just think Sean O'Malley's striking is going to be too much for him, and Sean O'Malley's going to win by decision. If I had to think Sean O'Malley was going to lose a round, maybe as he starts to slow down in the third round, Pedro Munhoz could maybe eke out a round in the third round. But I see Sean O'Malley winning this fight, just outstriking him 30-27 on the judges' scorecards. He wins this fight, and he propels himself into the top 10 of the division. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Also, follow me on Twitter. Let me know what you think at MMAJoeyC and Instagram as well. Thank you so much for watching the video. Don't forget to like it, and I'll see you in the next video.